There are 7 key routes to market, and they are critical to think about at the beginning of a new project. What you don't want to do is spend loads of time and money designing and developing, prototyping and launching a new product, only to find that you can't get it in front of your customers or in front of enough of your customers to make it commercially viable. This video goes through those 7 routes in some detail so that you can understand what they are and you can start to plan how you're going to sell your great new product idea. Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of From Idea to Profit. We're basically trying to understand what the 7 key routes are, and once we understand those 7 key routes, then we can pick the right ones for your idea, and then from there you can put a plan in place to go from where you are now to making a profit on your idea using those particular routes or route, depending what suits you. So we've got to understand them first, and that is the main point of this lesson. The objectives, as you can see, are to understand the routes in detail, appreciate the potential return on investment for each route, understand the ongoing commitment of each route, and then appreciate the appreciate the necessary prerequisites if you're going to go down those routes. So this diagram shows you the 7 that we're going to go through today. They are the main 7 ones that are appropriate. I've been in the industry now for 20 years. I haven't found someone who's made any money out of their idea using anything but one of these 7 routes. The costs refer to the ongoing costs of pursuing that particular route. So if you're looking at direct to retail, for example, your ongoing costs are marketing and shipping and duty to bring the product in, and logistics and customer service, etc., etc. So basically there's quite a lot of costs on some of these routes, but that's why you get a higher return or margin, because you're doing more basically. And we're going to go through that for each route in this lesson. Let's get stuck in. Licensing. A license is a contractual right between 2 parties where basically someone is giving someone else permission to use their intellectual property. Now, the ongoing involvement of this route is to maintain your IP protection. If you don't maintain it, then you've got nothing to license. But that really is the only involvement. The company you license your product to basically takes everything else under their umbrella. So they will deal with marketing and sales and manufacture and quality control and everything else. So someone else has full control over all of that, but they also have all the liability and all the cost of all of that. And all you really need to do is make sure that your patents are maintained. Now, because you're not doing very much, the return on investment is relatively little. And you're basically looking at 10% of the factory gate price. Now, the factory gate price is the price to actually manufacture the product. Now, for your particular idea that you're thinking about, that's really easy to work out approximately. You basically take what you think the recommended retail price for your product would be, so what it would be if someone bought it in a store. You divide that price by 5, and that will give you approximately what it's going to cost to make. And that's true of basically any product on the market today. Obviously, there are some variants in that, sales and discounts and whatever else, but generally speaking, if you take the standard recommended retail price and you divide it by 5, that's roughly what it's costing to make that product. So in this example, we're assuming that the retail price is just under £50 at 48. We're assuming therefore the cost price is a fifth of that, £10 roughly, just to make the numbers easy. And so if you do a license deal on a product that is about £50 retail price, it's going to cost you £10 to make, or a company who's going to license it, it's going to cost them £10 to make, and they're going to give you a tenth of that, they'll give you £1. So not a lot of money, but if it's a high volume product and it's much easier for a bigger company to sell much higher volumes, it can still work out very lucrative. You may not know, but James Dyson licensed the first vacuum cleaner that he created. This is it. It was licensed to a Japanese company. The license was territorial, so it only covered Japan. But that license deal basically paid for the rest of the Dyson company to be started over here, manufacturing and selling the product, albeit in a more tasteful colour scheme, although I'm still not convinced about grey and yellow for a vacuum cleaner, but there we go. But without this license deal, Dyson said in his book and everything else that actually the rest of the company would never have had the funds necessary to do everything that was important in terms of getting set up to sell directly to consumers and into retailers. So, prerequisites, well, you need solid intellectual property rights. That can be a patent, might be a registered design, very occasionally it could be a trademark. I'll give you an example of a joint venture that was based predominantly on trademarks shortly, but most of the time on a license deal you are going to need a very strong patent or registered design. You may need all three rights and be able to get all three rights and then license all of them as part of the package. This course isn't really about intellectual property. I've got some YouTube videos you could watch, or you can probably get a free, well, you're definitely able to get a free consultation in about 30 minutes probably from most chartered patent attorneys to discuss this in terms of your project. Do drop me an email if you want a contact for that. So this is an example of one of our clients that went on to get a license deal. This is a pan and tilt remote control device. You put a camera on it or a flash, and then you've got a little remote control, and you can control its angle and tilt from a distance, useful for wedding photographers. You can see the video of it here. This is their Kickstarter video, and you'll see in a minute the client Mike, who we worked with on this. And because of the Kickstarter video, basically he ended up with a license deal. So his Kickstarter video got seen by an agent in London who worked on behalf of a global photographic accessory manufacturer. They got in touch. They ended up flying over actually and seeing us to go through the product. We flew over there a couple of times as well, as we basically developed the design to suit their accessory range. They did the deal, they paid Mike, and that payment, that upfront payment, which is fairly normal for license deals actually, that covered all of his development and patent costs to date, which was great. He went and bought a new car with it. And then from there, the deal basically was that he was going to get a royalty payment for every product sold. Now, I've included this example because actually this didn't work out in the end. So he did get his upfront payment, which was great, but he didn't actually manage to get any royalty fees going forward. And the reason I bring that up is because it's quite important to realize when you're dealing with big companies, all sorts of things can change within that company. And it takes a long time as well for them to actually make decisions and get products to market. So various things kind of went wrong along the way internally within this big company, lots of different requirements and everything else. And in the end, the product never ended up actually getting manufactured. Now, Mike had all his costs covered anyway from the upfront goodwill payment, so he was quite happy with that. But it's a shame because the product actually never went to market. But I included that because I just think it's important to realise that you do lose control with a license agreement. You give that over to someone else and you're trusting them someone else to actually bring it to market. So that's license agreements. We will come back to them in lesson 2 now that you've got a basic understanding of them in terms of the pros and cons and whether it's right for you. Moving on now to the next one on the list, which is joint venture. Now this one, you're doing a little bit more than just maintaining your IP. Part of your ongoing cost for doing a joint venture is that actually you've got to do quality control. And the thing is, you'll be manufacturing the product and then selling that onto a company that you've got a joint venture with. So your responsibilities are much greater, but as you can see, your margins are greater as well. So a joint venture is basically a partnership. It's often, and in this scenario is almost always, a partnership between an existing brand. They've already got their retailer relationship set up. They've already got their marketing department and their marketing strategy. And basically you're leveraging that by putting your product into their range, but under their brand. So often what will happen is you'll go to them with the product. It doesn't have to be fully developed because the point really is you're going to develop the final design of that product with them to suit their brand and their range and their customer base. and they will supply you with the details of what they want in terms of colours and finishes and brand positioning, packaging potentially, and then you go ahead and manufacture it with their logos and their name on it to their final specification. They buy it from you, and then they're responsible for everything from there to getting it sold to various customers, hopefully all over the world if it's a big company. And often these joint ventures are with big companies with international presence, because that just means that you can leverage all of that would otherwise take you years to set up. Now, your likely return on investment, you can see the numbers here. You're basically going to be looking at around kind of £4 for a product that retails around £50. So 4 times the amount with licensing, but arguably with the fact that you've got to manufacture the product, maintain the quality and all of that, there's a lot more hassle for that money as well. I'll share with you in a minute one that I've worked on. So you do need some IP rights. If you're taking a new concept to a company looking to do a JV with them, then it would be advisable that you've got some IP protection, so that company knows that some of their competitors aren't just going to come along with a copycat product if they do a deal with you. You're basically preventing that happening, or helping to ensure that action can be taken if it does happen by having some IP rights, and that encourages the company that you're worth doing a joint venture with. You'll also need a proof of concept proving that your idea works, and ideally some kind of proof of market. So maybe you've done some market research surveys that just demonstrate their customers do want your product. This is an example of a product that we worked on. It's a child tracking device, and this client went on to do a joint venture with Intel. Obviously a fantastic deal for our client. Intel have massive global resource to help them develop the software and the internal electronics of the product. And with their huge network globally, they can also massively help with marketing and sales as well. It's worth saying he met the guys from Intel at the CES show in the States, and trade shows, particularly international trade shows, can be hugely beneficial to meet all sorts of people, and it can lead to all sorts of things. So don't rule out doing some of the bigger global trade shows to try and get in front of the right people and meet the right people in order to get things like joint ventures or license deals. Let's look at the role of a distributor. So a distributor will basically take quite a lot of the margin, but in theory do quite a lot of the work. Now, this is the one that varies most, because distributors vary in terms of what they do and don't do. Now, the key role that any distributor will do is to manage your retail relationships. Again, like a sales agent, they have a black book of contacts. They're in with quite a lot of different retailers with their existing products, and their role is to take in your product and distribute it to their network. Now, some distributors will almost just be glorified sales agents and do very little more than a sales agent would, but a good distributor actually will do almost everything. So that will be customer service, returns and repairs. They will warehouse your product and they will kind of package it up correctly for different retailers, and they'll account manage the different retailers as well. So someone like John Lewis, for example, they'll have a team of buyers. There'll be a particular buyer who is dealing with your product, and they'll have all sorts of questions from time to time. There'll be kind of marketing drives that they want you to be a part of. There might be customers who come back with issues with the product. There might be training requirements or things on their internal system that need updating. And all of that will be managed by your distributor and an expert account handler or account manager who is used to doing that. A good distributor will also have their own marketing, so potentially trade marketing, but also direct-to-consumer marketing. And ideally, they'd be able to pick and pack and send out individual products to customers when they buy them off their website or whatever, and equally handle big orders to big retailers as well. Now, the deal varies hugely with a distributor. It can be anything, as I say, from kind of glorified sales agent right the way up to doing almost everything for you. If you signed a distributor, for example, in a foreign country, and you weren't doing anything in that foreign country, it would basically be their entire responsibility to handle everything in country and probably do quite a lot of translation work on marketing material and stuff as well. So I've got a kind of likely return on investment there. As you can see, the distributor will sell to their retailer for around £22. Distributor margin might be 35%. Some, if they're doing everything, will want more like 40 or 45%. So just bear that in mind. Then you've got the price they pay you and your cash margin. So that gives you an idea of how much you would make if you went down this road. Just make sure in the deal that you do with the distributor that you're paying a sensible margin and you're really clear about what they're doing. If they're not doing much more than a sales agent, then you shouldn't be paying much more than a kind of 10% commission on sales. If they're doing everything and handling everything, then it's reasonable for them to be expecting like a 40% margin. So prerequisites for a distributor, well, basically you could do with some IP rights because again, they're going to be showing it to lots of different people. You don't want it copied before you've even got it to market. Now, distributors have a bit of imagination and often do get approached with pre-production or kind of final prototypes. They don't necessarily need production samples. It's worth talking about the difference a little bit here. So a prototype is something that's made as a one-off. A production sample is something that's made with all the production tooling, probably as a small batch of 10 or 20 samples where they're checking all the final details before production. Production sample is in the final materials made in the way that all the mass-produced products will be made. A prototype is made with prototyping techniques and you're really only making kind of one or two normally of them. Now, distributors will be okay with a pre-production prototype. They're used to looking at that type of thing. Ideally, if you've got a production sample, then obviously that's better because they can see the final materials and the final finish and construction and things. But you can get away with distributors with a final level prototype. You'll also need your production costing sorted out. You'll need to work out what margin you're going to make, and then you can give the distributor the price that you want them to buy from you for. Don't tell the distributor your production costing because you have to make some margin. So make sure what you're telling them basically is the price that you're prepared to sell to them for. So a distributor, well, basically this is the kind of pick and packing. They'll have all the products often stock, maybe 20 or 30 different brands of product. And you do need to make sure because of that they're actually going to give your product some attention. And we'll talk more about that in the next lesson. This is me and my wife, Hannah. This is when we were training our distributors. So this is their sales team. We were training them in how to sell the pushchair, how to fold it, unfold it, all the features, all that type of thing. As you can see, these are box samples, just come out of the boxes because they're all heavily creased. We'd never display them at a consumer show or in a store like that. So let's move on and talk about sales agents. We've touched on sales agents anyway in the previous section. So let's get into that a little bit more now. They do less than a distributor. They leave you to do more, but they take less commission as a result and leave you with more margin. Now, a sales agent really is just a salesperson who is already dealing with buyers in the retailers that you want to get into. Now, it can be really, really hard to get in with buyers, and therefore if you've got someone who's already selling into those people, who've already got their contact details and existing relationship, then that can be really worth its salt. I quite like the sales agent route, I have to say, because there's very little ongoing involvement. You do have to do all the background stuff in terms of the marketing, customer service and all that kind of thing. They won't take care of all of that for you. But in terms of working with them or what you need to do in terms of keeping them going and all that kind of thing, there's actually not much you need to do there. And they will bring in those sales and then you can focus on everything else you need to do. They generally take about a 10% commission on all the sales they make. And a lot don't take any money up front, so it's not like it's another cost as you're starting out. They only really get paid if they're making you money, and obviously that makes a huge difference. So you can see the calculations there and approximately what your cash margin might be if you're using a sales agent. So just bear in mind when I say kind of almost nothing in terms of ongoing involvement, that means almost nothing in terms of supporting them doing their role. They're pretty self-sufficient, but nevertheless, obviously there is all the other stuff about logistics and marketing and everything else that you still have to do. So it's not like you can just leave it, but you get quite a healthy margin and they are relatively self-sufficient. So we'll talk more in the next session about all the different prerequisites and therefore the cost really to get all those together. So just briefly touching on this now. Again, because they're about to go and show your product to a whole lot of different people, it's good to have some IP in place. It would be good to have a final prototype. Now, again, a bit like a distributor, sales agents will work with a final prototype. They don't necessarily need a production sample. They appreciate the need for you to get some pre-orders, get some interest before you invest in setting up for production of your product or manufacturing your first batch. They will need the pricing that they can give to the retailers, so you're going to have to work all that out. And often they'll request a product promotion pack, which basically communicates your product in the best light. It's often just a PDF these days rather than the kind of printed brochure. They can email it through and give the retailer that information to hopefully pick their interest. Now, it is sometimes quite useful to have a website and various other things as well. We'll talk about that in the next lesson, but these are the kind of key requirements you've got to have, a kind of minimum requirement, if you like, to be able to approach a sales agent and get them to start doing something for your product. So this is basically what they do most of their time, email, call, and then have meetings with retailers to try and get you orders on your product. Great, so moving on, direct to retail. This is basically where you cut out the sales agent, you cut out the distributor, and you go direct to the retailer yourself. Unsurprisingly, you end up with more margin, but you've got a lot more to do. You've got to now account manage your retailers, and you've got to go and do some selling. So it's quite a nice model in a lot of ways, but it is quite a lot of work. We're getting to the point now where if this isn't your full-time job and you're not starting to build a bit of a team around you to do some of these things, then it's going to end up too much. Ongoing involvement with retailers is quite a lot involved, actually. So every time a customer comes back and says, oh, well, this isn't in the box, or this doesn't work, or I've broken it, or whatever else, these retailers are going to ring you and expect you to deal with it. Also, they're going to want deals, they're going to want sales, and they're going to want support from the brand, from you, in terms of those kind of sales. So there'll be probably regular, monthly, or even every 2 weeks, there'll be some kind of conversation going on with the retailers regarding what their sales numbers are, what promotions they've got coming up, what support they're looking for from you, all of that kind of thing. So don't think the retailer just takes it all over in terms of the sales. Yes, they will sell to the customer. If the customer comes back with any problems, they're still just going to pass it on to you. And there's still quite a lot of management of that retailer required to ensure that they are selling the product effectively and they've got everything that they need. Return on the investment is really, really difficult. I've dealt with John Lewis. Their margin, is on an expensive product, because we were selling a kind of £900 pushchair. Their margin was about 45%. If it's a cheaper product, you may even get up to kind of 55%. They then have all sorts of stuff they want us to do in terms of paying for banners on their website or paying for additional point of sale display stands in store, that kind of thing. So you can end up with a big retailer losing a hefty chunk. Small independent retailer, someone who's got 1 or 2 stores in a local small town, for example, they might be expecting more like kind of 30-35%. It also varies by industry. So retail margins in cycling products are quite low. They're around the kind of 30%. Margins for something like a phone accessory store based in a motorway service station, they might be looking for 65-70%. Their rents are huge in those service stations. They've got to cover them, and as such, their margins are massive. So it's really difficult, but I put some numbers in there to give you an idea. Based on a retailer margin of 40%, it's probably on the low side for some sectors, but high for others, as I just described. But it gives you an idea of where you might end up. At the end of the day, it's going to depend on the deal, it's going to depend on the value of your product, and those types of things. So again, in the next lesson, we'll go much more into exactly what you need to do to develop your product to what level. The key thing though in terms of a prerequisite is you can't go to a retailer with a pre-production prototype, a final prototype. They really do need to see the quality of the final product in the final materials made in the production way. So you might get some market feedback from a retailer who's happy to give you some comment regarding the product, but what you're not really going to do is get a firm order, any kind of deposit or money paid, or any kind of PO or anything until you've actually got production samples. So yeah, you're also going to need pricing, obviously. It's going to be the first thing they're going to ask probably. And then the key other thing is a marketing plan. So often when we went to speak to retailers, the big thing they wanted to know is, how are you going to push the product? What are you going to do marketing wise that means there are going to be people coming into my store wanting to buy the product? So that is a key prerequisite, and we'll talk more about that in the next lesson. So here's a shot of my pushchair arc in John Lewis. So yeah, it can be quite tricky to deal with retailers. It is also a massive buzz when you do manage to get your product into a high street retailer and then you walk into a store and you see your product on display. That is really quite fantastic. Let's look now at selling on Amazon. Now, some of this stuff applies to other online retailers, eBay, not on the high street, etc. But Amazon is the big player, obviously, in consumer products, and there's some specific ways of working with Amazon, and that's why I've included it as a specific section within this lesson. We've also had lots of our clients do incredibly well on Amazon, and it can be quite a low cost way actually of getting some pretty good margins per unit, depending upon whether the product suits Amazon or not, and depending also on your customer acquisition cost. But we'll come on to that in more detail. So good thing about Amazon, they take about an 18% margin, and they have a huge customer base already coming to their website every single day. And if your product is similar to something else, or could be kind of a sponsored product with something else, so let's say it's an accessory to another product that's already on the Amazon platform, then you can immediately get your product in front of a lot of your potential customers very cost effectively indeed. Now, if you're going to be selling on Amazon, there are certain things you're going to need to kind of bear in mind. It is a bit of an art form. You're going to need to maintain your listing. The assets in terms of photography and video and the copy around the description of your product is absolutely critical to maintaining a decent sales rate. So all of that's going to have to be thought about. Now, there are people who do whole courses on how you sell on Amazon. I work with a guy who's got an incredible course on doing this. Do get in touch with me if you want his contact details. So the prerequisites for selling on Amazon really need some kind of IP rights. Amazon will maintain your IP rights rigorously. So if someone copies your product, there's a really simple way within the platform where you can report that to Amazon. You just have to list your patent number or your registered design number, your trademark number, or tell them which images even are being copied by this other listing, and they will delist it straight away. One of my clients, Barry Frieda, uses this all the time to get competitor copycat products delisted off Amazon. So it is really good to make sure you've got solid IP rights if you're going down this route, because it costs you nothing to flag these to Amazon and get them delisted. You will need obviously your product. With Amazon, it's not like you can take them a pre-production sample and say, will you buy this product? It doesn't work like that. You've got to have your end consumer product ready to go. And that means you're going to have to go into production and pay for your first batch to be made, tested, certified, shipped. You're going to have to pay the duty on that as that comes into the UK as well. But after that, actually, a lot of the costs are covered because Amazon will do all the warehousing, they'll do all the picking and packing, they'll take payments. They've also got their e-com website all well set up already. And with an 18% margin, actually, as I said earlier, that's pretty cost effective all in all when you look at it. So you've got to get quite developed with your product. You've got to have that first batch, but after that, actually, your ongoing costs aren't too bad. It's just a quick case study. This is a client of ours. They've developed this tofu press with us. It was probably 4 years ago now. and they're selling 50,000 units now every year via Amazon and their own website as well. That's the other great thing about Amazon, actually. It doesn't stop you doing any of the other routes, and it doesn't stop you selling the product via your website, or indeed having a website that just points people to Amazon so you don't have to actually take payment details or fulfill any orders. The final one of the 7, we're going to look now at direct to consumer. This is the one where, in theory, you can make the highest margin, but that really does depend on how much it costs you to acquire a customer. And what I mean by that is if you spend £100 on Instagram ads to get one sale of your product, and your product's £50 and you're making £30, then actually if you're spending £100 to get the customer in the first place, you're actually losing £70 a customer. Now, I spoke to an expert really in direct-to-consumer sales. He sold out his whole company actually a couple of years ago, who was selling direct to customers. And for the first year, they barely broke even. They had to spend so much money on marketing to acquire customers. But beyond that, the business became quite profitable because obviously it was quite high margin. But just bear in mind that when you start marketing your product initially, particularly if it's mainly online advertising, it does take a while before you can build the number of customers you're getting and until you can get that customer acquisition cost down. So initially, it might cost you £100 to get one customer to buy a product for 50, but what you're trying to do is improve your advertising and marketing and your messaging all the time until you get to a point where your customer acquisition cost is maybe £5 to sell a £50 product. And at that point, obviously, your overall margin is the £30 on the screen minus the £5 customer acquisition cost. So you're making £25 margin of product, which obviously is really good, assuming you can do that at volume. The ongoing involvement really with this route is that marketing and sales, it is all about the marketing and sales really. So it really depends whether you've got the right people around you to do that, whether you've got the right contacts, or whether that's actually something you've got experience of yourself are willing to do. Let's look at the prerequisites. Well, you're going to need your product, obviously. Ideally, you're going to need IP rights so that if people start copying it, you can do something about that and not lose your market share. You're going to need your listing details sorted out for your website, or if you're selling through consumer shows, you're going to need your show stand designing, and you're going to need to book space, obviously, at various different exhibition centres. Obviously, you need your pricing sorted out, but you can vary that accordingly. So you might want to play with that a bit to increase your volume by decreasing your price a bit at certain times of the year, or increasing your price as you come into periods like Christmas if yours is a gift product that's going to sell more around that time of year anyway. So you've got full control over that in this model. The big thing is you're going to need a marketing plan and budget. Very few products ever sell themselves. Everyone thinks that their idea is going to sell themselves. Really, when it comes down to it, that's highly unlikely. So here's a quick example. This is a product by a client of mine. The company is called Wicked Brick. They make these display cases for Lego models. They've branched out now, actually. They do display cases for other products and toys and things as well. Now, they've done incredibly well. They set up 4 years ago, started selling direct to their customer. Even today, vast majority of their sales are direct to customer via Google ads and then Instagram, Facebook ads, that type of thing. They now have a huge customer base. They have a purpose-built production facility just outside Cambridge. They're all making this in the UK, and they're employing 30 people. So they've done incredibly well in quite a short space of time using this direct to market model. And customer acquisition cost is what they spend most of their time now worried about. So what they're constantly spending their time doing is working on their marketing, trying desperately to ensure that they can win more customers for less money per sale. So that is really the kind of key part of this route. Just a final note, your end customer might not actually be an individual. They may be a business, in which case you've actually got a business-to-business transaction, and the prerequisites for that are slightly less onerous. If you're going to go and talk to a company, they're probably looking to order a much larger number, and as such, they may actually have some specific requirements that you can include in the last phase of the design development. We had a client who developed this skip lamp, and they sold it in large numbers to companies, hire companies, for example, construction companies, and they took that product to those companies when it was in the final stages, but before they actually tooled up and produced the production sample. And that basically meant the companies could have some kind of say in the final specification and make a couple of tweaks before it went to market. Now, this is a great route if you can do it, because what you can then do is go into production, spend the money on the tooling and the units, knowing that you've already got an order or a very interested customer for a large number of those units, and you don't have to invest in the production setup and manufacturing the first batch until you've got that certainty. So the prerequisites are slightly less arduous, and also you don't really need a complex sales and marketing plan, because at the end of the day, you're going to go and sell to a few big customers in that area. So, for example, with these guys, they went to all the big hire companies that hire out construction equipment. They could go and talk to the big skip hire companies who are hiring out skips, and they could talk to some of the larger construction companies. So they had a good customer base there that they knew they would go and approach. Now, they did do a blended model. If you look online now, you'll find this on various websites. So they also sold through some retailers. But they established the company off a couple of big orders to businesses that they dealt with direct, and that kicked the whole thing off and gave them that initial revenue. As you can see now, they have a range of different products. This is on their website, so they sell direct to their own website. They sell direct to some business customers, and they also sell to some retailers who are selling online as well. So that's just a slight variant on the direct to customer route, because it can be direct to your end individual customer, or it can be direct to a business customer. Personally, I really like the business customer route. You can get quite big orders that are lucrative because you're going direct, and you're not giving up loads of margin to other people. And as I say, you can go and speak to them and get some intent to order before you actually have to commit to your production tooling and units. So that can be a great route if that works for your product. Do also bear in mind, if you have a gift or a product that could be a promotional item or a corporate gift, then it could well be that you can actually go and speak to some customers, business customers, and get some large orders initially for your product that way before then looking at pursuing some of the other routes. As I say, relatively high volume, relatively high margin direct to the customer, but you haven't got all the faff of dealing with all the individual customers and everything else. You've just got one business customer to deal with. So that's the end of the first lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. Let's move on to the next one.